Guys, welcome back to the Dominant Daily Dad podcast, where we refuse to raise weak men, weak families, or weak legacies. If you've come here for comfort or seeking validation or another pat on the back, this probably is not the place for you. So I would just click on out of what you're in and go find something else that's going to add no value. But anyway, if you're joining me today, I'm happy to come back with episode 2. Hopefully, you caught the update from last week. If you haven't, please go check that out because we are taking a radical pivot after my time off. Today, we're going to attack one of the biggest lies that men and dads have swallowed in today's society. And that is that we must live a life inside the lines that someone else has created for us. Not anymore. Today, we're going to crush that. Today, we're going to tear out that page out of that book and burn this down. So let's get into it, guys. So I've had an incredible week, very busy weekend, and there's been several events that we'll get into and talk about in this podcast that have led me to this position. And today, as I was on my daily walk, I was listening to another podcast that was talking about something similar, and it's just funny how God tends to speak to you and give you exactly what you need when you need it. So, when we were boys, we were trained to sit down, shut up, behave, follow the rules, never disrupt the system. And as men, we end up living a life that feels scripted by somebody else. I've lived this, but I've always pushed back in my life. And when I look at my life, that has been the main storyline in my life is no to the status quo. And even in my book, Beardology, I talk about the verb definition of beard, it being an act of defiance and standing up against the status quo. And the biggest thing that I can relate to was when I became a firefighter. I joined the fire department, very paramilitary. I've talked about this before on previous podcasts, but I was a rule breaker, not to be a pain in the ass, but because of the status quo. I was disrupting the system by being who I am, by asking questions, by saying, hey, how can we do it that way? And as a man, that put a target on my back. And it also made life difficult. And we're going to dive into why that is. Why does it make other people uncomfortable when you decide to take the reins of your life? And for a long time at the fire department, I followed the lines that others drew for me. And that actually translated also into being a husband, being a father, being a family member, being a friend, how business should be done, how certain things should be done. Oh, we just do this for family, and this is what it should look like. When I turned 40 this year, I made a declaration, rather. It was a post on social media, but a declaration of, look, I am done explaining myself to people. I'm done explaining why I make the decisions that I do. I'm done explaining or trying to get you to understand my position. And I've always been this way, but I never publicly said it out loud. And my wife and I were having this conversation about this certain situation we had to deal with this weekend. And I was like, we're done explaining ourselves. Unless you're intricately involved in my life, you still don't know the whole story, right? Because although I'm an open book, although I come on here and try and be real and raw with you, there's not everything that you're going to know. Even close friends or family members, they're not going to know, but they're going to paint a picture of their opinion for your life. It could be close family, it could be close friends, it could be coworkers, it could be a boss, it could be whatever it is. And too often as men, we let that bleed into our lives. So for a long time, I followed the fire department. I follow the rules. Don't be a rule breaker. And the truth is, most men choke down their feelings just to keep the peace, right? They do this to protect everybody else's emotions in their life while silently bleeding on the inside. And we see fathers blowing up at their kids. I know I've done that. I've done it more times than I care to account, but it's because we're not handling this piece in our life. We're making the wrong decision. We're on the wrong side of the train tracks there, where we're so conditioned. We were raised to keep the peace, to sweep things under the rug. That's not strength. That's not authenticity. That's not accountability. That's not biblical. And when you speak your truth, the right people in your life will rise with you. And the wrong ones, they'll keep exposing themselves. They'll keep trying to make you feel bad for their bullshit. And we call this projection, right? And sometimes in business, we have this happen too, where people are upset about something, but it's not about what we did. They're just upset about something in their life. So they project onto us, they'll project their own things onto you. And we have to be willing to stand up and speak our truth and be uncomfortable. You have to stand tall. And so for a while, I did that and pretending like everything was okay. And maybe that's you right now. Maybe you're pretending everything's okay. You're just trying to keep the peace. It's easier to not disagree. And this shows up all the time, right? Maybe you and your spouse have different political views, right? And society has trained us, don't talk about politics. Don't talk about religion because it's only going to cause discomfort, right? And I'd have you consider instead of being raised or raising kids of don't avoid hard conversations, it should be the exact opposite. See, I teach my boys to try and have hard conversations. I teach my boys to solve the problem. I teach my boys to tell me how they're feeling when they're upset about something. And I think society's gotten it so wrong. And I use politics and religion because in my mind, those are the two things of instead of ignoring that people have differing opinions, why not teach people how to actually have a civil conversation about different opinions, right? But people want to keep the peace. And so hopefully this is landing with you guys because I know it certainly lands for me. And the lesson in today's podcast is here's the truth that most men will never say out loud. Most of the people telling you to stay between the lines, to color with inside the lines, are only saying that because they never had the courage themselves. They never had the courage to do the things that you're supposed to go do. They never have the courage to speak publicly or wear it on their sleeve, right? And they want you small. They want you to feel small so that they don't feel bad about quitting on themselves. And if you continue to hide the truth to protect everybody else's comfort, you're going to destroy yourself from the inside out. That's going to bleed into your family. It's going to bleed into your health. It's going to bleed into your legacy. It's going to bleed into a lot of different things if you choose comfort over discomfort. And again, I will go back to the fire department to prove my point here. I've been public about me being overweight. If you go on my Instagram right now, you can see a pinned photo of me where I'm just the big old, I have the dad bod, right? That was me at one of the lowest times in my life. And the reason I post that because of who I am today and what I'm doing today. This podcast is a perfect example. But that was me when I worked back at the fire department. And there was a time period about 2 years before I actually left the fire department where I was like, I got to start taking care of myself. My son had just been born. My best friend had just been diagnosed with cancer. And I knew I was avoiding the hard truth. I was comfortable and I didn't like being in an area of discomfort. I didn't like being as fat as I was, but it took me getting to a point where I was like, I need to change. So what did I do? I started working out at the fire department. I started changing my diet. And lo and behold, over the course of a year, I lost almost 40 pounds. And during that time, you would not believe the bullshit that people were projecting on me. And it's all because I was their mirror. I was doing something that they weren't doing, working out every day, not eating 10 pieces of candy at the front desk. And that bothered them. So what did they do? They projected onto me because they saw what they weren't doing and they tried to make it my problem. I dropped all this weight. I was feeling good. My health was improving. And the executive assistant under the fire chief was like, "Paul, you're just too skinny. You need to stop losing weight." And I was like, "Why is it okay for you to tell me that because I'm choosing to take care of myself and you think that I'm too skinny now because I've lost all this weight? But when I wasn't taking care of myself, you weren't saying anything." And guys, this whole story caused such a conniption within my division at the fire department that my two coworkers, who were also extremely overweight, extremely narcissistic, extremely sick with their health, multiple medications, stuff like that, right? They had to sit down with my supervisor because they were complaining that I was taking an hour a day to work out. I walk in the office one day, my office door is shut. I see them in there. My supervisor says, "You don't come in here." And then he sits me down. He's like, "Well, they're upset that you're taking care of yourself. You're working out every day before lunch, and they don't like that." And I was like, "Chief, am I allowed to do that?" "Yes." "But they don't like that you're going home." "Well, I have my own gym equipment." "Well, they don't think you're actually working out," which is ridiculous because you can see that anybody that loses 40 freaking pounds, 20 pounds, 15 pounds, you can tell, right? And they were projecting their bullshit because they weren't doing it. And so that is just a story in my own life that people want you to feel small because it makes them feel better because they gave up. And I don't want you guys to buy into this. Coloring inside the lines is not safety. It's actually creating a prison. God didn't create you to be a copy of somebody else. He created you to be a leader. He created you to be a builder and a breaker of chains for the next generation, for your offspring, right? And what the world does not need is more agreeable, passive men who are just trying to fit in with the status quo. The world needs a father bold enough to stand up and be firm and speak truth and lead. So, we're at the segment where we dive into a little bit of scripture. It's called Weapon of the Word. We're reading out of Romans 12, verse 2. And it is, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Right there. That's a command. That's not a suggestion, man. Conforming is coloring inside the lines. Conforming is choosing comfort over discomfort. Transformation is actually the commandment. And it begins the moment that you pick up a new pen and draw a new path with what God's actually called you to do with your life. And transformation only begins in discomfort. You can change for 30 days, you can change for 90 days. But if you go back to being comfortable, you didn't change or you didn't transform. And so, my call to action to you guys is that this week, I want you to sit down and reflect and identify one area in your life where you've been coloring inside of the lines because someone else taught you that's what you should do. Maybe it's an emotional thing. Maybe you're one of these peacekeepers. Maybe it's spiritual and you've stayed silent about your faith because it might offend people. Maybe it's political, right? Maybe you don't align with your family's values when it comes to politics. Maybe it's your fatherhood. Maybe it's other parents' expectations on what you should do with your kids. And whatever it is for you, I want you to break that line this week. You don't have to go set the world on fire, but I want you to identify it and I want you to break it. And that could be something different for each and every one of you, but make it truthful. And like I said, you don't have to go burn bridges, but you can simply just say, "Hey, that's not what I believe. That's not my family's values. So we're not going to do this." And speak truth and just watch how quickly how God shows up and separates the people that are for you and the people that are not. And that's a hard one. That could be a hard one for some people. I know it was for me. And so, guys, I hope that this episode hit you. I know that this is something that's been on my mind for the past few days. So if this episode resonated with you, please share it with another dad who needs this truth right now. We don't build strong men by staying silent. We build them by speaking and leading and locking shields and marching forward together. So if you like this, please like, comment, and subscribe and send it off to somebody. But remember this, guys, for the weak men conform, strong men transform, and quit coloring inside their lines, whoever they are in your life, and draw your own lines. And if you've read my book, Beardology, this is the call to be bearded this week. But until then, guys, you know the rules, you drill, dominate daily.